Hello everyone, hope you're having a fantastic Monday so far and welcome back to the Waiver Wire show. Your weekly information on one undrafted Pokemon and their potential usage in a draft league format. I'm your host Strompfel and unfortunately we're not going to have another accent for this week, so you'll have to live with my standard Scandinavian accent. Hopefully it doesn't bother too many people. If you watched last week's episode, you will know that we did not have a poll to decide this week's featured Pokemon. I had a lot of shit to do last week, which concerned my school, my job and my relationship. And I knew this beforehand, so decided to pre-record this episode so it went up on time. When life tries to defeat you, just smack it in the face. But back to Pokemon. Since I had the chance to decide which Pokemon to be covered, I decided on something that's special to me. I've used this Pokemon a lot and I really love it. So it'll be my pleasure to introduce you to this week's featured Pokemon, Gourgeist. Gourgeist is a really cool Pokemon when it comes to its stats. This is because Gourgeist has 4 different forms based on its size. We got the small one, the regular one, the large one, and then Game Freak kind of f***ed up the last one. They wouldn't call it like the mega sized or the enormous sized. I mean, if it was up to me, I would just call it the super duper awesome fantastic overweight as all fuck pumpkin featuring a triple Big Mac, but that's just me. No, they settled with the super size. All of these sizes have slightly different stats compared to one another, so we won't go into every size and the specific stats, but generally go over how the stats line up. So we have the HP stat, which is in between 65 and 85, depending on which Gourgeist you choose of course. A pretty good attack stat from 85 to 100. All of these sizes share the same defense and special defense at 122 and 75. They have a horrible special attack stat, which is not even worth mentioning. It's just as bad as my school meals, to be honest, which is complete garbage. And then last but not least, it has a speed stat between 54 all the way up to 99. This is a very confusing situation for me. We're having a slow Pokemon, but kind of not. I'm getting mixed feelings about this. It's kind of like when you meet a person that you knew a long time ago when you were a kid, and you don't know if you want to go and talk to them or ignore them. God, I hate that so much. Gourgeist is a grass and ghost dual typing, which is pretty solid overall. Nothing that I can really complain about, you know. Ghost is an amazing typing offensively, only having one thing stopping in its tracks, which is a normal type. Grass is a meh offensive typing. It kind of is just there, but in this case it does help out Gourgeist since it hits those normal types for at least neutral damage. Defensively, Grass and Ghost is okay. It does have its pros and its cons. It does give Gourgeist an immunity to normal types and plenty of resistances, and the more notable ones are water and ground. Even though it has a lot of resistances, it does have many weaknesses too, but we will get back to that later. Now, why do I enjoy using Gourgeist so much? Well, it's probably because of these cons that I'm going to talk about now. Now, Gourgeist has in my opinion one of the most underrated and best abilities in Draft League format, which is Frisk. Draft Leagues is all about counter-teaming your opponent and create strategies that they will not expect. If you surprised your opponent with something they didn't expect, you just took a commanding lead most likely. Frisk eliminates the surprise factor. By entering on the field, Frisk allows you to scout your opponent's item, which is so amazingly good. You can get so much information on your opponent just by looking at their item. Gain information like, oh, leftovers, it probably has substitute, or oh, a choice scarf, it will be faster than I expected, or holy shit, a sea crystal, something is about to go Chernobyl. With 4 different forms and 4 different sets of stats, Gourgeist becomes very unpredictable for your opponent. While you usually see sets that takes advantage of this pumpkin's physical defense stat, it could easily use its base 99 speed stat and become a very offensive threat instead. It also has a lot of support coverage under its belt, such as Will-O-Wisp, Destiny Bonds, Screen and much more. Now, Gourgeist is a great Pokemon and should not be slept on, but it's not really gonna be your first turn pick. Although picking it up later in the draft will serve your team with many roles. It's kind of a forgotten Pokemon and definitely an undervalued Pokemon in my opinion. As an example, last season in the GBA we had a tiering system, where Gourgeist fell into the lowest tier. This is what I mean with a value pick. Gourgeist will fit so many roles on a team like a 5-water grass core, a normal immunity, and basically 4 Pokemon in one. It actually does bother me a bit that Gourgeist wasn't drafted, but I can't see why. Here are some of the more common cons with Gourgeist. Now, Gourgeist has pretty one-sided bulk, since it could mainly take physical attacks well with that base 122. It does have some decent special defense with base 75, but generally wants to take some hits from the physical side. This could probably benefit your opponent in some way, I have not figured out how though. The problem with Gourgeist's weaknesses is that the things it's weak to happens to be probably some of the best offensive typings in the game, such as Fire, Ghost, Dark and Ice. This means that you really need a good teammate to pair with Gourgeist, since if it gets forced out by an opponent, something really hard hitting is mostly likely coming your way. Now, the last con is not that bad to be honest. I had a hard time finding a third con, so this is what I came up with. Gourgeist is very limited when it comes to offensive coverage. It usually has stab on both sides and max 2 coverage options. This makes it a little bit harder to use the offensive side of Gourgeist, since the limited coverage it gets might not match too well against an opposing team. But now it's time to bring out the popcorn and finally move over to Pokemon Showdown for some nice and crispy Gourgeist sets. Now, before we start with this first set, I just want to mention that all of these will be shiny. This doesn't mean that they are all build sets, which will be extremely wild, but I just love the shiny color on shiny Gourgeist. The first set is a physically defensive set with the supersized Gourgeist, since that has the best bulk. The item on this set is a Rocky Helmet, which is a solid item that gives your opponent physical moves a recoil. And since you can take those hits pretty well, this will be an instant check to everything that's physical. Other item options are leftovers to regain health every turn since you want to stay healthy, and or a Colbur Berry. The moves are Will-O-Wisp, Shadow Sneak, Synthesis and Leech Seed. This set is basically an annoyance to your opponent's team since it can spread burns, Leech Seed and heals whenever it feels like it. We do have the Shadow Sneak on this set to do some sort of damage. Since the damage output isn't really the main point with this set, having some sort of priority gains you a lot and can pick off weakened opponents. And having some sort of damaging move is always good in case you fall for a taunt. The EVs are simple, maxing to HP and defense to take physical damage as good as possible, and then a tiny bit in attack to increase Shadow Sneak's damage outputs. Next up we have the Choice Scarfed Pumpkin, which is a bit faster than people give it credit for. The Choice Scarf of course gives you a 50% boost to your speed stat, but locks you into one move. So which moves could we lock into with this set then? Well, we have the Phantom Force, the Foul Play, the Rock Slide and then the Trick. Phantom Force gives you a stab option, Rock Slide are for general coverage and to hit those birds. Trick is to cripple a Pokemon and give them a Choice Scarf, which they most certainly doesn't like, especially if they are defensive. Foul Play is there to hit a setup Pokemon for a lot of damage. I didn't really like any grass coverage on this set, so Foul Play was the best option. Say you're facing off against a scary Garchomp or Landorus which want to set up some sword stances to boost their attack. Scarf Gourgeist will give you a backup plan against these kind of setup sweepers, since you could outspeed them and hit them really hard with their own attack stat. The EVs are maximizing speed, 224 attack advancements, and then 44 in HP defense and special defense. The defensive bulk is just to show you that you can probably throw some of sort of investments on this Gourgeist set to be a little bit more tanky, since if you trick away your Scarf, you probably want to take some hits after that. This also works if you want to take some priority attacks that your opponent throws at you when you still have your Scarf. The speed is just good to have since you want to outspeed stuff with your Choice Scarf, and the rest is in attack with an adamant nature to do some damage. If you're afraid of maybe like a Jolly Haxor setting up Dragon Dances, you can also go with a Jolly Nature on your Pumpkin. That works really well too. Next up we have the Annoyance of the Sentry, the creme de la creme of Pokemon Cancer, this weird trick Gourgeist set. So this set is based around giving your opponent an item they don't want to have, in this case a Full Instance. The Full Instance is an item that makes you go last, and the speed is not a factor, you just move last. This is an amazing item to cripple offensive Pokemon, since you pretty much completely render them useless if they have the full instance. The rest of the set is kind of similar to the first set, since they both have the same EVs and two of the same moves, Will-O-Wisp and Shadow Sneak, for basically the same reason, to be an offensive tank. Now, the last move is Destiny Bond, which makes your opponent go down with you if they kill you. Destiny Bond is mainly there because it's annoying to face, which is the punchline with this set. Lastly, we have the Trick Room Gourgeist, which functions both as a sweeper and a support Pokemon. The idea is to set up Trick Room, which makes the slowest Pokemon move first, and then do some hefty damage or spread burns. As you can see, we do have a common trend here with Gourgeist, since its main job is to spread burns, heal itself, or be a team player while doing some damage. Phantom Force will be really strong on the Trick Room, considering we have max attack with a boosting nature. We also have max HP for overall bulk to maybe set up multiple Trick Rooms during one game. We are as slow as possible to be as fast as possible on the Trick Room, so 0 speed IVs with a brave nature. Now, we do have the Colbor Berry, which reduces damage from one dark type move. This is a really good item for many Ghost and Psychic types, since they will take reduced damage from a common knockoff. When knockoff is coming, Colbor Berry will activate and reduce the damage, and since they did not knock off an item, the move will be even weaker than before. This helps Gourgeist out a lot, since it will most likely get off multiple Trick Rooms or at least one Trick Room without your opponent stopping you. I think Mega Mogwai was the one that used a similar set to great success, so if you want to see this set in action, go watch that video. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Waiver Wire show. Now, if you want to be a part of the decision of next week's featured Pokemon, there's a link in the description that will guide you to a Strawpoll. The options for next week are Electivire, Absol, Zangoose, Chansey, Toxicroak, Shedinja, and Jellicent. If you know any Pokemon that wasn't drafted and want to see it featured on the show, leave them in the comments down below. Just so you know, next week's episode might be a little bit late. Why, you may ask? Well, the Easter Bunny. That's right, the Easter Bunny is Swedish. Suck on that, Norway. If you want to know how I hid the secret for so long, I used to hide in those green bunny suits on Liseberg. Really effective. Now it's my time of the year, so I'm gonna go hide some eggs. I have no idea what I'm talking about anymore. It's really late, I should probably get some sleep. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you have a great Easter next week if you celebrate it. I've been your host Strompfel, and I'll see all of you at the same time next week. Goodbye.